What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of these, all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to, provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. You were saying how you do a lot of interviews overseas and you get asked interesting questions different from what you get asked here in America. And Martin, I'm curious, what's first question that comes to your mind when something unique that you've been asked from overseas?
Well, I would say 3 years ago, it used to be, do you really think the EU is going to break up? To where now is like, come on, we can't take it anymore. How much longer we got to wait for this? I think the biggest problem with the EU has been that they stepped into this socialistic idea of equality and all that kind of nonsense. So you start with the telling people they had to accept migrants and things of this nature, and a lot of them were just militants burning churches and stuff like that. I mean, completely disconnected, really, from the people themselves. And that's why, all I hear is from everywhere, from Netherlands down to Palermo and Sicily. It's like they had enough. They want out.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and bam, I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. I can also take delivery at any time, extremely simple and less expensive than any other method. The do-it-yourself way to buy precious metals. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. I mean, look at how easy this is. The Vaulted app on my phone, I can access it at any time. Yeah, it's over the last couple of days, everybody's focusing on Epstein. And, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, what are you focusing on? Because it feels like everybody's being, I don't want to say distracted, not that it's not important, but that's the hot topic right now.
Well, I think, it's been spun the wrong way. Like I said, back in the 80s, I was warned, be careful. They will try and use women to get into you, stuff like that. So that's been pretty much a standardized agenda. I had one member of Congress that went to a tour basically by the Chinese government, and they do the same thing. They put in a really good-looking girl, and she's their kind of like guide, whatever. And then she said, "Oh, here, I took some pictures." Just puts her phone next to his. Here, I'll give you the pictures. And she basically has all his contacts. Then I got calls from Washington. We had a security breach. Your number is basically, they told me what happened. So I mean, this is pretty standard. Anybody that thinks that Epstein was simply like some pedophile or whatever, come on. You don't do that and bringing in, like, heads of state and princes and stuff like that. That's all for blackmail and power. You're not talking about somebody going down to the local bar and saying, "Hey, you want to go fool around with some young girls or something?" uh, that you would expect in a bar, not in with Bill Clinton and stuff like that. And I believe even Gates' involvement was largely to the extent that Epstein was taking that agenda, and you blackmail people, and then they got to do what you got to do. You say this is it or this comes out. So I think a lot of the people think that, oh, these are just like pedophiles or some, we should know who they are. First of all, I don't think anybody would be able to tell the difference between a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old today. We're not talking about 6-year-old kids. It's clearly, I think, all for blackmail, and that's why I think Gates was involved with him. Can you get something on this guy so he does what I want him to do? That's what I believe. So releasing all these names, I think, is a problem, largely from the standpoint that they were probably really blackmail victims. And what did they do? Epstein didn't do this for personal pleasure. He was doing this for somebody else. So who was it? We do know that some documents have come out showing that he was an informant for the FBI. So I mean, there was somebody else behind this, which I think is the real $64 billion question. And it was a Mossad, was it CIA? This is the stuff that they do. And it's fairly common. Even when Goldman Sachs, I believe, was feeding information to the prosecutor Elliot Spritzer to take down the head of AIG because he didn't want to issue the insurance for the mortgage-backed security stuff. And then Spritzer, gets him to resign, and then he thought he was now going to be king of the hill and turn against Wall Street. All of a sudden, what comes out? Oh, look at these checks! You paid for hookers. They have insurance policies against everything. And that's pretty much it. So Epstein is a distraction. There are things that are far more important going on than this nonsense with Epstein. And I don't know if you'll ever get to the truth of it because I believe the intelligence agencies were behind it.
Even if they put out a list at this point, no one's going to believe it. They could release 100 names and people will not. They will question it and discredit it, and yeah. But I'm surprised, or maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but how much attention this is getting. And you just said, there's way more important things going on, which I agree with. What's at the top of your mind right now?
Mainly, I'm concerned about on two fronts. One, the geopolitical side. I'm kind of disappointed in Trump that he should really be cutting off absolutely everything to Ukraine, period. And if I were him, I would say you don't get another, penny. Forget $1. You don't get anything until Zelensky either resigns or stands for election. The Ukrainian people should have a right to vote, and that's what's being denied. Ukrainians that I've spoken to have even asked, are they allowed to have peace without permission from London and Paris? Zelensky just does whatever he's told. He does not represent the people. So I think that's serious. Europe, I don't think Trump quite appreciates that it's been Europe that stabs him in the back on every possible peace deal. Mainly because they are going to fall apart because it was improperly designed from the outset. And this is the real issue. I mean, either they create war with Russia, or you're going to have everybody storming the parliaments with pitchforks. That's really what it comes down to. And they don't care about their people. They don't care about anything. As I've said before, I had a source that attended the Vienna Peace Conference, and he called me after. He says, "This is not about peace anymore. This is about war. Everybody's talking about conscripting people, drafting everybody, preparing for war. It had nothing to do with peace anymore." You got Mertz over there doing the same thing. I mean, the first obligation of a government is to protect its people, not send them into the slaughterhouse. And look, I've seen the internal memos from NATO. NATO is a terrorist organization, basically. They should have been shut down when communism fell and the Warsaw Pact fell. All right, leaving them there, they have to keep their pensions and everything else. And the memos I saw, they were upset about all the money going to climate change. And it was all about how do we remain relevant. And the only way NATO remains relevant is constantly saying Putin wants to invade Europe. That's it. If Putin doesn't want to do that, then why do you need NATO? So this is unfortunate, but people have to understand, when you create any kind of a government agency, they will fight tooth and nail to retain their power. This is their salaries, their pensions, Department of Education, USAID. They're all the same. It doesn't matter. NATO just wants to create World War III, so they remain relevant. They're pushing to expand into Asia, when opening up offices in Japan. Why? To keep the world at in a constant state of fear. Give us money, we'll protect you. They're the ones that cause most of the problems. Why did they get involved in Yugoslavia breakup? They were bombing the Serbs only because the Serbs supported the Russians. That was it. The solution to Ukraine was very simple. Split the country as the Minsk agreement allowed. The Donbass should have been allowed to vote in Crimea. There are no Ukrainians there. They're all Russians to begin with. Crimea, 15% of the population are still Mongols, Tartars from the invasions of 1240. Just Czechoslovakia split. Czech Republic, Slovakia, ethnic. Yugoslavia broke up Serbia versus, Croatia. Um, that region had a lot of conquests. Uh, the Ottoman Empire, had occupied that. So you have Muslim, you have Western Christianity, and you have Orthodox Christianity. On top of all the ethnic differences, uh, as I've said before, Bismarck, when he was Chancellor of Germany in 1888, had forecast that there would be a major war in Europe, and he said it's going to come from the Balkans. Absolutely correct. It was 1914. Serbia assassinates the Archduke of Austria. I mean, look, I don't see that region as solvable until you split it up. That's it. This war will go on forever and ever and ever.
Do you see it as a peaceful breakup or kinetic and violent?
Probably violent, because Zelensky is honestly the biggest piece of shit I think I've ever seen as a pretend world leader. He takes his orders from Paris and London. I had spoken to even Ukrainians when they were sent to the border with Russia. They thought they were just going to be at the border. Then it was MI6 that told them to invade into the Kursk region. Nobody cares about Ukrainian people. They're just pawns on a chessboard. That's it. They really don't give a shit. We're trying this with Romania. That's why they interfered in the elections there. NATO's building its biggest base in Europe in Romania to attack Russia. The people understand that. They don't want to go to war with Russia. And so they voted the other way. And how dare they go against us? I spoke to somebody in the second election, and Macron was there to make sure that they won again. They don't care about these people. What I have heard, honestly, from Western Europe is they're all communist anyhow. I mean, it's just the ethnic hatred just is systemic.
Is this going to the plan in your estimation, or has it been getting delayed? Because they've been clamoring for war with Russia now for a good amount of time.
Look, I think our computer on the international war level has a panic cycle in 2026. So I think you're going to start seeing it perk up again from August on this year. And like I said, there's nobody interested in peace. Nobody. They all listen to the neocons who basically run NATO. And rule number one is you never talk to the enemy, because if you talk to the enemy, you might have peace. That's why they were all upset that Trump even spoke to Putin. Oh, how dare he? Well, let's see. Okay, let's not talk to anybody and all just push the button. What is that your solution? It's I mean, just go down the list. I've never in my life would have expected such a wholesale level of federal, government, states, heads of state throughout Europe that are all just warmongers. Every one of them. Stalmer, Macron, Merz. I mean, where is anybody interested in actually protecting their people? I mean, it's pretty pathetic. You got Kalis over there, the former PM of Estonia, openly coming out and saying Russia's too big and needs to be broken up. So, you take a gun, you go in the front line. It's then you look at the Middle East. It's the same kind of a not. There's no solution there. That's religious.
Yeah, I've heard you. I've heard you talk about the Middle East, and I want to get to that. But I want to ask you about Meloni in Italy. What do you think of her?
She seems to be the only one that's at least maybe pro-Trump to some degree. I think she was the only one who even came over for his inauguration. I hope she wakes up and realizes this is not a good agenda. You got Macron over there saying we don't need the United States. France has got its own nukes, and they'll provide the umbrella to protect Europe. Yeah, right. I don't know. I've just never seen such irresponsible heads of state. You would think. Maybe it's just the next generation, and they never really had to deal with World War II. The only real memory I have of it was I remember my father walking home down the driveway. That was about it. So I'm not very optimistic on Europe, and economically they're really in a disaster state at this. Germany is probably the worst, and what people have to realize is that German economy is actually shrinking. It's down at least 3%, maybe up to 5%, and I'm talking about the number of jobs available. They just blew their brains out, really. They took COVID lockdowns, then they did the climate change nonsense, and then they put the sanctions on Russia. Whatever they could do to undermine their economy, they have done. And Germany is 25% of the GDP of Europe. So that's the whole problem. And you're seeing it in the bond markets. You're seeing it. It used to be, that the Germans were austerity, stable, etc. So people would buy the bonds and short other bond markets, but that's kind of gone. Merz is basically saying once inflation, he needs more money to build for war, etc. So all that was reversed. So the thing that I believe you're going to see is that because everybody was they thought Germany was the stable bulwark of Europe. Germany gets in trouble, you're looking at a financial panic off the charts. Germany is at risk of ending up in default. Then you have Japan on the other side. This is part of is showing, I think, why they also need war. And you get these people, the dollar is going to crumble. Really? Okay, fine. Let me put all my money in euro. And then they start shooting bullets and everything. You're not going to get anything out. People don't look at the real facts. as I've said before, the capitalization in the New York Stock Exchange by itself is more than all the exchanges of Europe combined. I mean, Europe is highly socialistic. It's, you know, they just followed Marx, and that's about it. That's why their economic growth is a fraction of that of the United States.
Does Russia want to stop this war?
Russia's not interested in war. Putin has tried, you know, the press twisted, oh, he's threatening. No, he's telling you. Is this really where you want to go? The press is so biased, it's pathetic. All they do is beat the war drums and let's go get them, you know. I would draft every damn journalist that says anything like that. Here's a gun, you go to the front line. This is what you want? Go. You know, wars take place you know, this idea of, you know, conquest. There has to be a profit. All right. Unless you're talking about philosophical, like Khrushchev, we will bury you. That was a communism will defeat capitalism. It wasn't for money. All right. Then you have religion. Okay. That's why I'm concerned about, you know, if they took out the Ayatollah, about 30% of the population in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, etc., are still Shiite. That'd be kind of like a Protestant assassinating the Pope, you know. There's nothing there in Europe for Russia to seek. It's always been the other way around. There have been 3 major attempts to conquer Russia, because Russia has assets. It's the richest country from a natural resource perspective. But if they walk into Europe, what are they going to get? Absolutely nothing. You know, the French will basically say, you're going to pay our pensions now. Thank you very much. You know, that's about it. And they'll get nothing but civil unrest. There's no upside gain. They don't have gold, energy they have to buy from Russia to begin with. You know, when, as I've said before, when Japan went into Manchuria, it did so to get energy. There's got to be a profit to it.
And then you inherit all those illegals in Europe as well, right? That have been flooding in from all these different countries.
It's a mess. You know, if I'm Putin, I'm standing back and watching Europe implode itself. I mean, economically, it's falling apart. There's nothing there of any value to go in. You know, it was, you know, power plays for Napoleon and Hitler, etc. You know, Hitler didn't care about the people, but he did, you know, he liked the culture per se. Stole all the art. Didn't bomb Paris because he thought it was pretty. You know, he didn't want to wipe out the monuments per se. The people, yeah, okay. You know, but you know, that's a different motive. I mean, if I'm Putin, I'm not signing any peace deal when I see every one of these countries increasing their defense, implementing drafts. I mean, they want war. Why would I sign a peace deal?
Why don't you think Trump is cut? Why has he not cut off the funding?
I think he's listening too much to neocons.
Who though, Martin? Who do you think he's talking to? Who are the neocons?
I think his Secretary of State, Rubio. I mean, I had contact with him before. He's basically a neocon. I was told he was giving the position as a peace offering to the neocons. But I disagree with Trump on Ukraine, and I wouldn't give them even 1 cent. And I would demand elections and let the Ukrainian people actually vote. What do you want? Not Zelensky.
So as we sit here, July 8th, this is going to continue. Russia, Ukraine, it's showing no indications of stopping, even not seeing any even slowdown with this.
No, I mean, the only hope that Putin even has is to absolutely defeat Ukraine. That's it. Otherwise, it's always going to be a staging ground. And the West just uses it as a pawn in this chess game. They don't care about the Ukrainian people. I mean, look at it this way. The death toll was 130,000 when Zelensky ran for election. I am promising peace, he said. It's now 1.2 million. He had a peace deal with Putin. Who hopped on the plane? That was Boris Johnson from London. Ran over, said, you're not allowed to have peace. That made the front page of the Ukrainian press. And that's why a lot of them, say, basically, are we allowed to even have peace without permission from London? Then you have Zelensky standing up saying, oh, we're destroying Ukraine. This is going to be the biggest investment opportunity of the century for Europe. He's just counting all the money that he thinks he's going to make out of this. How many trillions will I get to rebuild Ukraine?
What about the people themselves in these countries? Take Ireland, for example. You see the uprising and people all up in arms of what's happening there. Do you see that type of movement occurring where the people will take matter into their own hands?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, that's what our computer is forecasting about this 2032. We're looking at the fall of these governments.
It seems so long away, though, Martin. Not to interrupt you, but it seems so long away. 7 years.
Oh, trust me, it takes a lot of time. It takes a bit more, and I think you're going to see what will really spark it will most likely be the war. When people can't, just sit on the couch and watch TV, and it starts affecting them, then they're going to get off their ass. So I think that's where the war ties into this, and that's going to start more or less, probably a lot more front page news next year, but. Look, this is Republican forms of government are the worst because every pretend representative is up for sale. They go with the highest bid. They don't represent the people at all. Nice idea that our founding fathers had. But, back then they would meet for a few weeks. That was it. And the terms were 2 years because you were really donating your time to the country. They started paying themselves salaries. and that was to get support for the Civil War. Say, okay, fine, you vote for war with us, and we'll give you an annual salary. That's where it all started. Before then, they were paid on a per diem basis. That was it. So, unfortunately, it's always the corruption that takes place. As I've said, when Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, major debt crisis, he didn't have to fight to get to Rome. All the cities cheered, opened their gates. It was the Senate that fled to Asia. Unfortunately, a lot of people, believed Cicero, but he was the fake news back then. He was one of the oligarchs. Caesar's this dictator. Well, then, if he's this dictator so against the people, why did the people cheer him? And why did you flee? It's just look at the facts. That's pretty much it. It was, that whole Civil War was propagated by Cato. And they even named the Cato Institute when, he's defending the Republic. Total bullshit. But, it's this is where we're going. By 2032, we'll have a new form of government. All of them are going to, collapse. Europe is really a basket case. And like I say, all the interviews I do throughout Europe, they all are asking the same question. When will it fall? They've all had enough.
What do you see then in regards to the Middle East? We saw a couple of weeks ago some exchanges, missile exchanges, and then for now it seemed to be quiet, sort of quiet, even though Netanyahu was just in Washington this week. Where do you see that going in the short term and long term?
Not very good either. Netanyahu is a neocon. He actually went to school in Philadelphia. He hung out with Bill Kristol and attended their family gatherings. All right. It was Bill Kristol's father, Irving, who started the whole neocon movement. So Trump may have gotten rid of Dick Cheney and Victoria Nuland and Bolton, etc. But I think where they suckered him in was that Netanyahu was of the same cloth. And so I think, unfortunately, you have Trump thinking that he's a head of state rather than just a neocon. And he managed to get Trump to do what no neocon could have possibly done. And look, you have a lot of people out there on all kinds of sides. You got evangelicals, you got Masonic Jews who actually think that they can bring about the second coming or the end of the world, Armageddon, whatever. They really believe this stuff. And it's very, disquieting to say mildly. And, rebuilding the temple and all this kind of stuff. I mean, there are people that really want to do this. And I mean, I've been there to the Dome of the Rock. It's throughout the Middle East. There is this huge rock in the middle of that, and the Jews say that's the rock that Abraham took his son to sacrifice. And Islam say, no, no, this is the rock that Muhammad ascended to heaven from, the same rock. So how do you resolve these things? They're not negotiable. Netanyahu, is, many people are saying that he is one of these deliberately trying to bring things about. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, it's Trump told him to at least back off and not to assassinate the Ayatollah. That would have been a complete disaster. You're then turning a conflict into a religious war. You'll be activating sleeper cells everywhere. I mean, it's just a real mess. Absolute real mess. This is the stuff that these people are playing with. I have said before, I argued with Bill Kristol back in the 90s, and he was saying then, if we remove Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi, would bring peace to the Middle East. All three are gone. There's no peace. And then you can look at Wesley Clark, his speech from 2007. It's on YouTube. After 9/11, he went and also found the same thing. He said that he was told they were going into Iraq, and he asked, "You've tied 9/11 to Iraq?" They said no. And he, in his speech, says that he was told they intended to go in and take down 7 countries that used to be satellites of Russia, and conquer the Middle East. And he said, since when does the military surrender its duty to protect the people to go overthrow other governments? I mean, these people that are there, look, they're sick. It's all about power grabs. I mean, what they did to me was the same thing. I mean, I was asked to put in $10 billion. That was to take over Russia, and I refused. And that was interfering in the 2000 election in Russia. And that's why Hillary blamed Putin and the whole Russiagate nonsense that was all fake and made up, because, she assumed that she lost not because of herself. Oh, it must have been Putin who interfered in the U.S. election because she interfered in 2000. I mean, but this is what these people do. They always, they think they can change governments. And I've heard that back then. Oh, I was told I put in $10 billion, I'll get 100 back. That they were all the gold, the diamonds, the oil, everything would then go through the New York trading desks. This is the bullshit that I was told back then. But, and they really think, they believe their own BS. And it was more or less, oh, if we go in and we overthrow Putin, the Russian people will cheer us and give us a ticker tape parade and say thank you. Really. He's one of the most popular people in Russia's ever history. But this is what they do. They beat them, they spin these stories to the point that they believe them themselves.
Isn't there a goal for Iran to, the Iranian people to overthrow that regime? Because it would make it would make it easier. They wouldn't have to militarily go in there.
Look, we did that in '53. We overthrew the government then, stuck in the Shah. This has been part of the CIA agenda I mean, there were even investigations of the CIA assassinating heads of state back in the 70s. I mean, this is, oh, well, they're really bad, so we have to do this to them. You know, they actually, they operate by taking the very thing that they claim Russia is up to. Well, we'll do that to them. So it's like we're in a bar, and I just cold copy it and punch you in the face. Well, I knew you really wanted to hit me, so that's self-defense. I didn't wait for you to hit me, but I knew you wanted to, so I'm going to hit you first.
What do you think the future of Israel is?
I mean, Israel will survive, but it's the same thing. Their people are subjected to these hard right leaders that they want to conquer everything around them, and that's the only way you get peace.
That's what they think, right? I mean, that's what they. I mean, look what Syria has been. They flipped that upside down. Lebanon.
Look, I told you I had discussions with Bill Kristol back in the 90s, and he said remove Saddam, Assad, and Gaddafi will bring peace. And I said, you're out of your mind. It's tribal. They don't see themselves as those countries. We drew the borders to begin with, not them. All right. When the Ottoman Empire was broken up after World War I, they see themselves as Sunni, Shiite, Kurd, as groups, not as all Syrians. They just don't see that. It's always been tribal in the Middle East. You had the big war ended up, the Saudis won, so it became Saudi Arabia. All right. The Hashemites lost, they became Jordan. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. These are religious differences and tribal. I mean, just look at the Balkans. It's the same thing. Talk to a Serb, they hate Armenians. It's just the way it is.
What do you think the future of Iran is? Will they stay in power, or Western civilization? Will Western civilization take over, overthrow this regime?
I don't think so. I mean, I haven't looked at it lately, but this was pretty much on track. We should have been looking at this, revolutionary thing. It came in right in 1989. The same as when you're looking at the fall of communism, Tehran, Berlin Wall falls, Tiananmen Square. So these things tend to be contagions. Like I've said before, Rome overthrew its Tarquin kings in 509, and the Greeks go, maybe that's a good idea, and democracy is born 6 months later. American Revolution, French go, that's a good idea. They start Bastille Day, 1789, the very year that about 3 months after, George Washington's inaugurated. Tiananmen Square happens, then Berlin Wall falls a few months later. I mean, these things tend to be contagions, and that maybe the ideas spread that way. Um, so the revolution in Iran came right on schedule with everybody else. Um, and but we've been messing around in the Middle East for a long time, and these people don't respect the religion or the culture of other nations. They really don't. This is what's tearing the EU apart. Uh, they try to put in these socialistic agendas, and it doesn't work. They're bashing Hungary. Oh, you have to accept these people who are going to burn your churches down, but we say you have to.
I watched one of your other interviews recently, and you were talking about the central banks and the Federal Reserve, and I don't believe anything is happening by accident right now, and what is their role in all this? Because they need war. Am I accurate by saying that, Martin?
Not really. I think honestly that Trump is on the wrong side on this one. Trump is he's a borrower. He's not a lender. So he always wants, lower interest rates, bashing the Federal Reserve and Powell, etc. Our computer is showing a panic cycle for May of next year. Trump's just wrong. He's just absolutely wrong. And Powell has been keeping rates steady, mainly because he knows war is coming. You lower those rates dramatically while these people are building armies, etc., you're going to have massive inflation. It's Trump. I've published charts before. I mean, the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates from January 2017 all the way. It didn't stop the stock market. The stock market went up. They called it the Trump rally. Interest rates decline with recession and depression. They rise in bull periods. This is really the major difference. I know a lot of people say, oh, the central banks need, make money from war and stuff. That's not on Powell's mind. Powell, if he was going to do that, he would be lowering interest rates to further it. He's trying to stop it. But this disquieting rumors in Europe are that Christine Lagarde will step down, and she's being touted as the next head of the WEF. I have very little respect for her, to begin with, but she came from Klaus's board, just like everybody else did. Ursula, head of IMF, they're all from his board. I wouldn't worry about the central banks. I would be paying attention to the World Economic Forum. That's the real entity with a philosophy to control the world.
Do you see like the Peter Thiels and the Elon Musks and the Mark Andreessens, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerbergs of the world playing a role in that WEF, that World Economic Forum?
Some of them, yeah. I don't know what it is. If they make too much money, then they feel that they have to somehow negate that by, being magnanimous or something and manipulating the world. I'm not really sure. Um, but all this nonsense of, you know, climate change and all that. I mean, they don't know what the hell they're even talking about. Um, you had Bloomberg coming out and saying, "Oh, all the floods down there was because of climate change." Really? Where's your proof? You know, they have nothing of. You had Greta coming out when there were all fires in Australia. Oh, it's climate change. Really? You know, yeah. Anybody that has ever visited that area, or even the redwoods in California, they have big knots on the side of them. When I asked, what are these knots on these trees for? Oh, that's because of fire. If they, catch fire, then that regenerates the tree. So these things have um, evolved over the centuries to accommodate for that. So obviously, it was before, soccer moms were driving SUVs. It's, but it's here in Florida. We get a red tide in the Gulf, and a politician, oh, vote for me. I'll make sure there's no red tide against all the farmers. Blah blah blah. All I did was Google it. What was the first reported, red tide? 1642 by the Spanish. I think a lot longer, centuries before there were farmers or chemicals. you know, um, but I don't know. These people always have to blame humanity rather than understand that Mother Nature has been doing this for a long time.
What do you see then? As your computer shows war escalating in 26. What are people in the United States that are blissfully unaware? What should they expect from this, and how they'll be impacted?
Once you get the war, you'll see the capital flows will come to the United States. Um, you're looking at the gold still rising, stock market still rising. Um, the the other wild card out there besides war is climate. There is a
You broke up, Martin. What did you say? You broke up for a second.
The other wild card out there is climate. The Ring of Fire is intensifying greatly, and throughout history, what it is, and our computer's been projecting we're heading into a cooling period, not a warming period. That often takes place largely with volcanic eruptions. It throws so much ash up. You can look, there's a book, I think, The Year Without a Summer, 1816, when Krakatoa went off. It was snowing in July in New York City. Unfortunately, it looks like that's where we're headed, into a cooling period. And when that happens, you also get a rise in disease. So I would be expecting more of a sharp decline in the population, particularly after 2032. You're also looking at, it becomes really across the board when you're looking at this issue. You have the current in the Atlantic is also now starting to show signs of stress. And if you've ever been to Europe, I mean, there are palm trees on the west coast of Scotland. Why? Because the water is very warm and takes it up there. If that current stops, then you're looking at really an ice age in northern Europe. It's got nothing to do with, soccer moms driving around SUVs. I mean, these things have happened before. Um, so we're looking at a cooling period coming out, war coming, um, and all of this will contribute to basically a major political shift in the forms of government that we end up with um, post 2032, and that includes even China. Um, I mean, I was just up in Alberta in Canada. It's the same thing. About 60% of the people want to leave Canada now. You got Carney up there. He was one of the authors of Net Zero for the WEF in Edinburgh. And everything that Alberta has, he wants to eliminate, from energy to cattle. This is why 60% of the people are looking at leaving. I mean, Canada will break up the same as Europe will break up. You can't put in these centralized governments and become dictatorial. You had, what are you supposed to tell these miners? Stop drilling for metals, stop drilling for oil, stop raising cattle, go make some, solar panels. That's, what our Biden Secretary of State told coal miners.
Well, and you bring up China. I was going to ask you about that. What is their role right now? As we've talked about Europe, Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, is their plan to just sit back and kind of let these things play out and just try to stay out of it?
Not really. I believe there are discussions about giving jets to Iran. But China also now realizes that this war with Ukraine is not with Ukraine, it's with NATO. And there's no way they can allow Russia to lose. Because Russia goes down, they're next in line. So from my sources, basically saying that China will defend Russia against Europe. And Europe is going to lose. I do not see Europe as winning this one.
What about Iran?
Iran is basically going to be boosted mainly by China. Look, they built a railroad there to Iran. China gets 80% of all the energy produced by Iran because of the sanctions. I do not see them sitting on the sidelines. Oh, okay, fine. You're going to destroy Iran. Okay, that's going to affect their economy. 80% of Iranian oil goes to China. You really think they're going to sit on their hands? From what I've been told, they're already sending jets, proposing to send jets to Iran to rearm it.
Well, what about Taiwan?
I think Taiwan, they have no choice but to go in. The Biden administration pretty much guaranteed that. And Pelosi hopping on a plane over there. There was always the one China policy that we technically agreed that Taiwan was part of China. And, that essentially led to a saving face issue. So as long as everybody agreed to that, then they didn't have to go take it. When Pelosi flies over there and stand up, all this stuff, all the nonsense, now all of a sudden Taiwan's got its back up and forced China to go in. So you're going to see, you know, this is World War. You're seeing the tensions rising. As I said, it's like a contagion. Even in Thailand, they're in dispute over borders with Cambodia now. I don't know what it is, but it's like, yeah, they're getting we should go after these same guys. They've been pissing me off for a long time. I don't know. Whatever old grudges there were seem to surface again. And so that pretty much dictates what we're looking at globally. Just a lot more military, civil unrest rising pretty much everywhere.
What do you see then for the United States in terms of recession? And before you answer that, could the Japanese bond market play a role in igniting it?
What we have to understand about Japan is that, yes, they're one of the largest holders of U.S. debt. However, that's not the government. It's private. Private corporations hold U.S. debt as a hedge against their own government. So it's not that the Japanese government would start dumping U.S. debt. That, it's privately held is the bulk of it. But they've been saying that Japan is the exception, over 200 percent of GDP, because the government owns everything. That's very nice, but economically they are also contracting. The two countries that have actually saw their economy shrink are Germany and Japan. So this is not a long-term solution here. I mean, this is the trend. Japan will default. It gets to be I think they probably would be the first. And a default comes since they own their own debt. The problem basically surfaces when you cannot sell the new debt. And Japan a couple of years ago, boasted we bought 93% of our own auction. Oh, really? That's a good thing. That shows that nobody wanted it. So I'm not very bullish on Japan at all. The dollar going down right now will be more or less an important low, and you're looking at then the capital is going to come here both from Asia and from Europe as well as the Middle East.
Then with that occurring, do you see the United States going into a recession, or will that be avoided?
No, the U.S., we're in a recession into 2028. Largely because it's more of a, Trump with his tariffs, very nice, but you have declining economic growth outside the United States. So trying to sell more stuff to them is not going to be very conducive. Japan is shrinking. You got China. China's trying to create a consumer-based economy, following U.S. model, but Their economy is also in an economic decline. Europe looks like it's going more into a depression. Um, so we're looking at a global recessionary period into 2028.
You know, it sounds to me, and correct me here, but you know, for the United States, I mean, we're in a recession now, but if we just stay in a recession, it sounds like a win, right? The way to me, this country, like the state of it, best case scenario.
Yeah, look, we're a consumer-based economy versus like Europe is more of a mercantile. We sell things to everybody else. The situation we have here is that, I mean, I said before, like out of every um, dollar a consumer spends in the world, 25% comes from America. Europe, at best, it's $1.29 out of 10. Europe is pathetic. You can even Google it, and you'll see that the average net worth of a German is less than that of Italian. They keep their taxes very high. Socialistic reforms and agendas are very high. It increases the cost of production, and it stems the economic growth of Europe.
Where can people find you, Martin?
ArmstrongEconomics.com. You can go there. It's completely free. We don't sell advertising, or you don't have to put it in your email. We try to keep it as an open forum for everybody.
Is the computer still showing? Will we have an election in 28 or 32?
It's not real bullish on a 28 election. I'll put it that way. We can see a lot more craziness between now and then. The Democrats the computer is showing that the Democratic Party is collapsing. I said that at our conference last November. People were kind of surprised, but I said it's going extinct. It's like the Federalists did, pretty much, and for similar reasons. But it's the Democrats. If Trump says the sky is blue, they must come out and say it's red. That's the whole problem. It's no longer about what is good for the country. He said this, I must say the opposite. That's not what you're there for. You're supposed to be there for the country and for the people, not for your personal agenda. And as I said, we have offices in Thailand. That's the sex change capital of the world. But they call themselves lady boys. They don't go in there and say, you have to call me a woman, you know?
What about the mayor, the man running for mayor, Mundani in New York? I mean, do you see that just being laughed out, or you don't see that resurrecting the party?
No, I mean, look, it's typical of the final nail in the coffin. It does not understand anything about economics. The government will. First of all, it was the Biden administration telling people to kill chickens for the bird flu. All right. So then you have the price of eggs going up. What a surprise, And then he blames the stores that are selling them rather than the policies that caused it to begin with. Um, uh, it's everything he says is the same routine that Lenin did to create the Russian Revolution.
Martin, until our next conversation, thank you for coming back on.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's always good to see you.
Mic drop.